We are not expecting any fire drills. So if the alarms go off, there are exits down the stairs the way you came in. Please don't use the lifts. And there's an alternative exit behind me. And basically, if anything happens, just follow me to the way out. I shall be faster than most of you. Other than that, we'll get underway in a few minutes. And it's pleasing to see the interest that this application, or this concept, I shouldn't say application because it isn't one yet, has attracted. So it's good to see the turnout. Jenny and Michael, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine, David.
Excellent, thank you. Good morning. And good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Brilliant, excellent. So we're all nicely set up. So, good morning again, and welcome to the meeting of the EAP, that's the Executive Advisory Panel for Planning Communities, which is held today on Wednesday, the 15th of November. And we'll just run through some of the more formal items of the agenda. And so agenda item 1, apologies for non-attendance. I think we're a full house, are we not? Oh, of course, thank you. Councillor Anne Lee, thank you very much. Agenda item 2, are there any members' declarations of interest? Councillor Carter, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to declare that I do work for a company, BI Engineering, and they sent a letter in today. So I'm just declaring that. No,
thank you. It's just a personal interest. Thank you. Can I refer you to the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of October, pages 5 to 8, and does anybody have any comment as to their accuracy? Splendid. In that case, I can sign them as a true record, if that's okay. Thank you. Lovely. Right, well, thank you. The next item of the agenda is the substantive item, which is the Kettering Energy Park, and it's a discussion regarding the draft master plan document. But before we get involved in the detailed discussions, it's important that we set some parameters and some ground rules. First of all, please understand that this is not a planning meeting. This is an opportunity for the promoters of this scheme to give us information which might be useful in the understanding of this project. This is not a dry run of any planning committee meeting which may, during which an application, if an application is brought, may be discussed. This is not that forum. It is important that we're able to discuss what the developers may be interested in a calm atmosphere, and in a way that provides feedback from members of this panel to the proposed master plan. And obviously, we have had a considerable volume of correspondence from residents and from town and parish councils about this scheme, and all of the written submissions and the verbal submissions, which I'm going to be asking for in a minute, will be taken into consideration. Further, it is important, and I want to emphasise, that the planning community's EAP has no formal decision-making powers. This is an advisory panel. This is not a committee. Its feedback and conclusions are to ensure that all sides can exchange and note information freely, and that if the matter goes to the executive of this council, then this panel advises the executive in that matter. The principle of development is not established until or unless a planning application is actually approved. That any planning application that is which is brought will be considered by the relevant planning committee in due course. I have allowed three speakers on this so that the promoters can be made aware of some of the local public opinion on this matter, and to insist engagement from these speakers and other residents and town and parish council representatives and other interested parties, and also to allow engagement from members of this executive advisory panel. I'd like to point out that Northamptonshire Council will be hosting a community meeting in the next few weeks, in which, again, local communities that may be affected may put their views directly to the developers. Naturally, as part of any planning application that might be brought, there will be full public consultation, which will inform any decision that may be made. So I hope that this explains the context behind this meeting, that this is not a planning committee, that we are not making any decisions on any master plan or indeed any planning application that might be put forward in due course, but we are facilitating a discussion in which the master plan itself and its what is being suggested in that master plan can be debated in this forum. So I hope that explains the matter as clearly as possible. So I'm going to ask Mr. Paul Woods, to introduce the report. Then I'm going to invite the three public speakers to address the meeting, and we'll be interested to hear with what you're going to be saying. And those public speakers, just for the record, are Mr. Kevin Binley, Councillor Adrian Watts from Burton Latimer Town Council, and Councillor Paul Roth from Findon Town Council. As far as the remainder of people who have put in objections and may wish to continue to do so, or indeed put in expressions of support, please continue to do so, because all submissions that we receive will be taken into consideration. So we do want to encourage a broad engagement between the promoters and developers who want to bring this scheme forward, and if members of the public, town and parish councils, and of course the wide range of other stakeholders who will be involved in consideration of this matter. So I hope we have an interesting and calm debate this morning. So thank you for your patience on that fairly lengthy introduction from me, and I'll pass over to Mr. Woods to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm sure you're all aware, this is quite an extensive report which has been produced, so I just intend to give a potted headlines of what the report covers, with a detail to be left with as detailed in the report. As paragraphs 4.1 to 4.4 of this report outlines, at the last EAP discussion held, members agreed the draft master plan document for a 7-week public consultation, despite some concerns, including the scale of warehousing proposed and the traffic impacts of this. At this meeting, it was agreed that responses to this consultation would be reported back to this EAP, including proposed amendments, as a necessary step before the master plan could be taken to the appropriate committee for its consideration and potential approval, enabling it to form a material consideration in a determination of future planning applications at the site. As paragraphs 5.1 to 5.9 of the report outline, consultation on the master plan document was held between March and April this year, and this yielded a healthy amount of feedback, albeit this was mainly negative. The bulk of this feedback appears to have come from residents who live in the vicinity of the site and who raised concerns about local impacts of the proposals, although feedback was also received from others, including towns and parish councils, statutory stakeholders and planning consultants. Paragraph 5.4 of this report details a petition opposing the proposals, which had over 2,200 signatures at the time of writing, and paragraphs 5.7 to 5.9 outline other forms of local opposition, including an open letter from a number of town and parish councils, and this is available at Appendix B of the report. On the basis of the 18 consultation questions and the level of feedback received, this has yielded an extensive report as it has sought to ensure that local voices are heard. However, there's also been a lot of recurrent themes across questions, with some being particularly pronounced. Therefore, the focus here is on covering key areas of the report ahead of discussion on this, although it's recognised that these themes are not exhaustive, as other areas of feedback have been received and are covered within the report. The biggest area of concern related to traffic and transport impacts associated with the proposals on both the local road network and settlements in the vicinity of the site. The general feeling was that the proposals would create significant levels of transport movements, and this would impact on local settlements, particularly at Findon and adjacent villages, including Woodford and the Addingtons. Feedback in this area included criticism that no transport assessment work was published alongside the master plan for consultation, and concerns over air and noise pollution. In response to concerns raised at the potential number of traffic movements the energy park will generate, it is outlined at paragraphs 24.4 and 24.5 that officers have sought clarity on the vehicle movements figure projected with the proposals, and it is advised that 16,300 daily vehicle trips are expected as a result of these, although it is outlined at paragraph 28.12 that this figure does not include any deduction for trips made by sustainable modes, such as public transport. Irrespective of this, however, officers consider this remains a significant volume of trips to a rural site, including from the perspective of the emissions these movements will generate. In terms of traffic flows, paragraph 19.12 outlines that transport modelling work undertaken by the promoters expects the A14 to be the main draw for traffic linked to the proposals, although additional traffic expected through Findham, particularly at the A6-A510 junction, and further work is ongoing to determine what mitigation measures are required to improve capacity. Overall, as paragraph 19.16 of the report outlines, the modelling work shows that the road network, both local and strategic, is projected as being able to accommodate the traffic growth anticipated with the proposals. However, the impact of these trips from an emissions perspective is flagged as an area of concern at a time when the council needs to be actively reducing these in line with legislative requirements. On the theme of traffic and transport, it should be pointed out that in relation to considering issues, officers have been made aware of a typo at paragraph 19.11 of the report, where it states the traffic modelling note has been revised to consider a development floor space of 370,000 square metres. This is incorrect and should read 390,000 square metres. However, this change does not affect the rest of the contents of this paragraph. The next key area of consultation feedback was in relation to the need for warehousing. As outlined at paragraphs 6.15 and 11.11 of the report, many respondents question the need for more warehousing across North Northamptonshire, and therefore at the site itself. Not only was it flagged that the Joint Core Strategy Policy 26 does not specifically identify the Energy Park site for warehousing, there is a general perception the area has an abundance of warehouses already, including a number which are currently sat empty. Scepticism was also raised by respondents as to the ability of new warehousing to address skill shortages, and with increased automation in the sector raised as a potential barrier to this. In response, paragraph 11.14 and Appendix C of the report agrees that there are vacant warehouses in North Northants, although the need for new logistics sites is also flagged through work undertaken by the South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership in 2022. And this is also reflected in the Council's Housing and Economic Needs Assessment, which outlines a need for at least an additional 480,000 square metres of logistics floor space across the area to 2041, which is in addition to existing commitments. On this basis, and given the available evidence, paragraph 1114 outlines that demand for strategic warehousing across North Northamptonshire is strong, and this is projected to remain over the long term. And it will be a key issue to consider through the North Northamptonshire local plan and its development. Another key area of concern related to impact on the roundhouse and matters on heritage. Many respondents raised concerns about the impact of the proposals on the Grade 2 listed roundhouse and other heritage assets in their proximity to the site. This included Woodford House, particularly in respect of the massing and height of buildings being proposed in the master plan. This included Historic England, who at paragraph 12.4 raised concern as to the evidence base which considers the impact of the proposals and has informed master planning decisions at the site. In response, the promoters have prepared an updated heritage desk-based assessment. As flagged at paragraph 12.7 of the report, it has not been possible to secure confirmation from Historic England that the promoter's revised heritage assessment is technically robust, although Place Services, the Council's expert advisors on heritage matters, have since confirmed this document is sufficient for this stage of developing proposals at the site. In addition to the revised heritage assessment, it is flagged at paragraphs 21.7 and 21.10 of the report that further work will be required to determine potential impacts on heritage assets, and this will include a landscape and visual impact assessment being prepared as part of developing a planning application for the site, if this is to come forward. Landscape and visual impact is another area of concern raised through consultation feedback, specifically in relation to buildings being proposed at a site of up to 30 metres high. At paragraph 21.2 of the report, it is outlined the site is a wold and one of the highest spots of North Northamptonshire. As a result, development is expected to have a landscape and visual impact, particularly given the proposals for 30-metre high buildings. As paragraph 21.8 outlines, the site is also identified as a landscape character area, which is characterised for its open agricultural landscape. Taken together, it's recommended at paragraph 21.11 that a review of the building heights is undertaken in response to concerns raised through consultation, albeit it is flagged at paragraph 21.8 that the nature of the proposals, plus the elevated plateau of the site, will make visual mitigation difficult. Another area of feedback related to planning policy and the scale of development. A number of respondents raised the fact that the Joint Core Strategy Policy 26 does not allocate land at Burton Wold for warehousing uses, and considered the inclusion of this within the master plan does not align with an energy park. As paragraphs 11.11 and 20.6 of the report outline, it is correct that Policy 26 does not allocate the site for warehousing specifically, and it is reaffirmed that the site was not previously subject to assessment for this use, relative to alternative sites, prior to its identification in the Joint Core Strategy. Nevertheless, Joint Core Strategy Policy 26 makes clear that the promoters have a right to prepare a master plan for the site and for this to be considered by the Council, and these proposals have been tested through consultation with this EAP and the wider public. However, many representations took issue with the amount of floor space attributed for logistics use, where it considered these effectively constitute a warehousing site, and queried how this related to requirements of JCS Policy 26. These concerns are similarly shared by officers, with it proposed at paragraph 11.15 that discussions are held with the site promoters to review the scale and mix of uses, as well as evaluation of the site to be undertaken through the North Northamptonshire Housing and Employment Land Availability Assessment to help with the issue of the site not being assessed for its development potential. Energy infrastructure and employment uses criteria is another area where we got a significant amount of feedback. Paragraphs 16.1 to 16.9 of the report outline the feedback on what is considered appropriate energy infrastructure in respect to the proposals. Paragraphs 16.12, 16.17 and 16.9 outline that generally there was support for more renewable energy generation at the site, as well as battery storage, but this was less pronounced when considered in relation to serving employment uses at the site. In respect of wind, it is outlined at paragraph 16.3 that respondents queried both the lifespan and ownership of the existing turbines and wondered how this would impact the proposals. At paragraph 16.4 and 16.5, the proposed grid connection was questioned by many respondents, with this considered to suggest the on-site renewables are insufficient in their ability to serve the scale of development proposed. As a linked area, feedback was received on the employment uses energy criteria. Paragraph 13.4 outlines there was general agreement that the criteria to meet at least 50% of user energy needs through the on-site renewables was too low. In response to issues raised, it is outlined at paragraphs 13.8 and 16.15 that officers contacted National Grid for feedback on the proposals and consultation responses, with advice received from a technical viewpoint that they had no concerns and the criteria to meet 50% of user energy demands from the on-site renewables was considered reasonable, given renewable energy is intermittent in nature. Notwithstanding this, on the back of consultation feedback, a number of areas of further work are proposed, including addressing concerns raised about turbine ownership and lifespans, and further clarity on what constitutes a high energy user. In conclusion, the report contains a number of suggested areas of further work in response to consultation feedback, and this includes technical inputs from stakeholders, and these are outlined throughout the report. However, key conclusions are that previous concerns reported to EAP in March of this year remain and have not been fully addressed by the promotion team. To overcome this, paragraphs 25.1 and 25.2 of the report suggest discussions ahead on the scale and mix of uses proposed at the site, and also that it is subject to assessment through the Housing and Employment Land Availability Assessment. Further to paragraphs 26.1 and 27.1, members are invited to consider the contents of this report and provide the necessary feedback to enable the promoters to finalise the master plan, following which this can be considered by the appropriate council committee.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Mr. Woods, and thank you very much for that very detailed run through the report. Certainly, a lot of very interesting consultation responses have been received on both on the technical matter as well as on the more on the more general principle of what's coming forward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite public speakers to come forward, and I'd like, obviously this is going to be very interesting because I'd like, the promoters need to understand some of the thoughts and some of the opinions from local residents and local town and parish councils. And I also would like to thank these public speakers as well as everybody else for the immense amount of hard work that they've put in detailing their comments and their responses to this idea. So I'm first going to invite Mr. Kevin Binley. Is he here? Yes, he is. Good morning, Kevin. And would you like to address us, please? Yeah, press the button.
Thank you, Chair. The master plan is not in line with the joint core strategy. It is not sustainable development and is contrary to local and national policy. It has not been drawn up in conjunction with the local community. The public consultation was flawed, contrary to local and national policy and law. Policy 26 of the JCS states the site is for sensitively located renewable and low carbon energy generation and complementary employment uses. The master plan is for a strategic scale warehouse industrial estate of over 5 million square feet with high energy demand occupiers plus a further 5 million square feet of greenhouses or hydroponics. An industrial site with buildings 100 feet high, associated road and infrastructure, 5,000 plus employees and over 16,000 vehicles per day cannot be described as low carbon renewable energy generation. The officer's report states land at Burton Wold is not specifically allocated for strategic scale development and that fundamental concerns remain. The officer's report also says it's difficult to discern how buildings of the scale proposed are sensitive to the landscape setting or enhance the distinctive qualities of the Burton Wold landscape. And finally, the officer's report says the sustainability of the proposals on balance is questioned. Any master plan must be prepared with the local community. As is evident from a letter from the local, town and parish councils, this has not happened. Evidence provided by NNC shows the developer had site plans, maps, surveys and assessments of the proposed site in 2021, but these were never shared with the local communities despite requests for information. The transport assessment has not been published despite repeated requests from communities affected, nor was it shared with this panel. The fact that key documents were not made available to members or the public is material. The officer's report states the developer has now increased the size of the warehouses, my estimation is 30%, to 486,000 square metres, and that the transport assessment has been revised significantly with the number of vehicle movements increasing. These are material and significant changes after the public consultation closed. The gunning principles of public consultation state that consultation can only be valid when there is sufficient evidence, information to give intelligent consideration and must be available, accessible, and to provide an informed response. Contrary to Section 149 of the Equality Act, no information provided those with protected characteristics. As such, the public consultation fails the statutory test. It is suggested that changes may be made to the master plan, which will then be submitted to planning, bypassing the requirement to work with the local community and the imperative for another public consultation. We believe that this disregards local, national policies and law. Finally, Policy 26 states that the master plan is for low-cost renewable energy generation. We urge the members to reject this proposal to build an industrial estate in the heart of rural Northamptonshire. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Binley, and thank you for your comments. I'd just make the point that this panel can neither accept nor reject anything today, but I know that your comments have been noted. So thank you for that. I'd now invite Councillor Adrian Watts to address the meeting. And Mr. Watts, Councillor Watts is from Burton Latimer Town Council. Good morning, sir.
So, thank you very much for allowing me the chance to speak on behalf of the Town Council. Burton Wold is a unique, historic and environmentally important part of Northamptonshire. The master plan, which has been drawn up without proper consultation with local communities, would destroy forever 150 hectares of good agricultural land. The area is categorised by Natural England as being an area of the highest probability of the best and most versatile land, which National Planning and Policy Framework says should not be developed, and even the officer's report states that in terms of climate change and sustainable development, the sustainability of the proposals on balance is questioned. The developer in the master plan states that the site has relatively low ecological value. However, the site is located close to several environmentally sensitive areas, including the Cranford SSI, and is functionally linked to the Upper Nen Special Protection Area. Only minimal and not statutory habitat assessments have been undertaken so far, but it is already established that the site is populated by some 40 plus bird species, mammals and amphibians, many of which are protected. On renewable energy, the Burton Latimer Town Council and the public at large are supportive of low carbon renewable energy, and the master plan claims that on-site renewable energy would provide 50% of the site's need, and any excess renewable energy would be exported to the national grid. But the grid have stated that they would not be able to accept any export until at least 2031. Despite the solar farm being given consent in 2015, there are no installation works underway. No date has been given when they would be operational, and the developer has confirmed that they cannot connect the solar farms to the local distribution network. We are also concerned that NNC may not be aware that the wind farms were sold in 2019, and are therefore not aware that the electricity generated by the wind farm and the associated renewable credits have been sold under long-term contracts. Given the above, the site will have to import much of its power. It would be a renewable energy site that imports non-renewable electricity. On transport, no transport assessment has been provided to members of the EAP nor to the public as part of the consultation, which renders the public consultation deeply flawed. The officer's report now states that the site would result in some 16,300 vehicle movements per day, 5,400 of which would be HGV. Many of these vehicle movements would be via the A6 and the A510 junction at Findon and the A14 A510 junction, resulting in a significant impact on many of the surrounding villages. The Joint Core Strategy identified that employment zones should be located near to sustainable forms of transport. Burton Wold is a remote, rural location with no rail connection, no bus routes, and very little safe, sustainable transport provision. The use by the developer of the NSTM database to calculate traffic impacts, a model which the NNC has recently decided to replace because, and I quote, "The age of the model, its assumptions and underlying data means the validity of model outputs could come under scrutiny for future assessment," is contentious and would have traffic impacts on the local and strategic road network. And finally, the lack of accessible information and provision for protected characteristics for any aspect of the consultation process also invalidates the process under the Equalities Act. This is not Kettering, it is not an energy park, and we, as one of the 14 councils who have signed the open letter, urge you not to approve this up to the executive. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you very much, Mr. Watts. And again, I'm sure your remarks have been noted. And just for good order, again, we are not in a position to approve or not approve anything today. So, our third public speaker is Councillor Paul Roth. Paul is from Findon Town Council. And good morning, sir.
Good morning.
The stage is yours.
So I'm Paul Rothy from Findon Town Council on behalf of Findon Town Council and residents of Findon. I'm here today to represent Findon Town Council and the residents of Findon in regards to and campaign against the proposed Kettering Energy Park development at Burton Wold. Following a less than meaningful engagement with the agents for the developers in August 2023, where we weren't provided with any documentation, Findon Town Council arranged on its own arrangement a public information meeting for the residents of Findon. Specifically, the area that is major concern to Findon as its residents is the impact of additional traffic on our community and the unsuitable infrastructure to manage the increase, an infrastructure that is already at capacity. Not only will any further increase in traffic negatively affect our community with increased noise and pollution levels, which will damage our residents' future well-being, but also the infrastructure of the A6 and A510, which cannot handle any increased volume, especially from HGVs and delivery vehicles. This has also been noticed by NNC's report that the A6 has been identified as a strategic focus in the NNC's 3-year plan due to the foundations already crumbling. The impact upon the road network would be 29% of the aforementioned 16,300 additional vehicles coming through Findon, a significant volume to a rural site. Concerns are raised as to the carbon emission implications developments of this scale will generate. On this basis, the sustainability of the proposals on balance is also questioned. In addition, the roundabout on the A6 is also not suitable for additional volume of traffic, with the changes that have been shared not being viable. Not to mention the through route of the A510 from Wellingborough, passing through a busy built-up area that houses schools and social areas. This will bring a substantial increase in risk of accident. Whereas the plans have noted that all traffic will be encouraged to use the A14 to access the proposed development, in reality, this will not be the case. And the traffic model that was used in any initial proposals was, as aforementioned, based on a model that is not only out of date with current volumes, but has also been confirmed as so by NNC, serving this proposal as moot. A fundamental part of the strategic plan is for developments to also be sustainable. This is described as being accessible by cycle and on foot. There is no suitable infrastructure, either planned or possible, that can maintain this guidance when travelling from Findon or the Earthlinborough-Weston areas, which brings significant challenge to the proposals fulfilling even the minimal criteria. As a final addition, we also urge that scrutiny and challenge is also directed towards the commercial viability and need for this in this area. The proposed development would offer employment to a demographic that is representative, but with employment in those groups above the national average, in a region that is also performing above the national average. This clearly shows there is no requirement for additional workspaces to be created without the addition of housing and infrastructure. Both again points that the region cannot accommodate on the aforementioned. To add, a number of nearby developments and recently vacated premises remain unused, offering plentiful alternatives. Based on those points and to those which will be heard elsewhere this morning, or have been, we urge the committee to reject any further considerations for this development, whose justification doesn't align with any guidance, is not based on any meaningful model or policy, and will have a substantial negative impact on Findon, its residents and the surrounding areas. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Right, well, thank you very much. And, my thanks to all the public speakers. We understand the points you're making. We understand the passion with which you're bringing these. And also thanks to everybody who's come to attend today's meeting. That's dealt with the position from the public speakers, and I think clearly we could see the consent. We could see consensus with the public participants in this meeting. I'm now going to ask Mr. Thomas, I think it will be, from Michael Sparks Associates, working with the developers and promoters, to make his presentation. After which members of the EAP will have an opportunity to debate the whole thing and consider the proposals in the round. So, Matthew, good morning. Get the technical matters sorted out. While we have a quick pause, Jenny and Michael on the screens. I can't see you on the screen because it's being used for other purposes, but did you hear the contributions from the public speakers clearly?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Chair, heard perfectly. Thank you.
And also, very likely, and when we get to the debate, I'm not sure quite what we're going to be doing about hands, so if you need to chip in, just make sure that it's known you wish to.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just going to call a 5-minute break in proceedings. So if anybody'd like to use, there's water over there, and there's facilities out just out of this door and to your right if anybody's interested. And we'll reconvene at 5 to 11. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we can start taking our seats, please. Need to try and move on, maximise time for discussion. Right, brilliant. I see that the technology's been fixed up, so well done. And so now we're going to have a presentation by the promoters, led by Mr. Matthew Thomas, who's works for Matthew Sparks Associates and is representing the promoters and developers of this site. So it's over to you guys. Make your presentation. Just a technical note: I can now see you, Michael, and Jenny on the screen, so that would be useful when it comes to the debate in terms of any hands that go up. So that's great. So, Matthew, over to you.
So I'm Matthew Thomas. I work for Michael Sparks Associates, and we've been working on this project for a number of years. I'm joined today by Tony Watkins, who's representing First Renewable Developments, who are the promoters of the Energy Park proposals. I think it's pretty best if I hand over to Tony for the first few parts of the slides, and then I'll go through some of the more detailed technical aspects after that.
You know, might be just for clarity, it might be best to have a microphone, but it's being provided. Thank you, Louise.
Is that better? Can that be heard?
Yeah, that's much better.
Great. It's showing a different slide to the one we can now see.
Just a minute.
So, 1 second.
I'm sorry, Chairman, but I cannot hear anything.
Thank you, Michael. Right at the moment, nothing's being said, but which is probably why. But if you,
Check what screen
I'll-
you're showing.
okay, can you just speak into the microphone just for a minute?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear that, Michael?
That was okay.
Get up again.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was frozen. Can I just check that that's working? Okay,
Yes.
that's working now, thank
That's
you.
working. Apologies for that. Technology still seems to be a bit glitchy. So we're going to talk in the first 3-4 slides to talk about the principle of the energy park itself. Now, an awful lot of the information that we have submitted, and Matthew will come on to that in terms of the documentation, relies upon the thought of decarbonising growth and development. Irrespective where development occurs, it always has some form of negative impact, and development main focus through planning is to look at how it mitigates that, and then in the planning balance shows that it is better than another form of development which may be elsewhere, or another physical form of development. From our perspective, this site already has 40 megawatts of implemented solar consents that are yet to be developed, and those will be developed in conjunction with building the grid connection at the site. Now, the proposals for this location have always been on the basis of an integrated development, and that's why the infrastructure is seen as one big package. The infrastructure itself is a large physical investment at the site, and we have made sure that that infrastructure development can support all the activities that we've been suggesting in the master plan. A key part of that is to ensure that, one, we can make the best use of the renewable energy developed on the site, for example, through battery storage, and also encourage other people to the site where advanced technologies need a location that can actually build upon synergistic relationships. We've done an awful lot of work when we look at hydroponics, and we'll come back to that in a second, to show how, from an integrated model of land-based agriculture, hydroponic agriculture, and sustainable employment on the site, this is, we believe, a sustainable proposal. So the concept mixes other technologies, and I want to be very clear about the wind. Those wind projects are owned by large infrastructure companies. The first one was developed by the existing landowners, the BTs, and at its time was the largest wind farm, onshore wind farm in the UK. It was groundbreaking at the time and is still a very effective way of producing low carbon electricity. The 9 further turbines were brought to the site through First Renewable. First Renewable brought those turbines to the site because they're the highest efficiency wind turbines anywhere on land in the UK. And again, that is pushing forward with the idea of producing class-leading technologies on the park. The scale of the solar development on site is of a strategic national scale. 40 megawatts of solar will rank in the top 10 of projects anywhere in the UK. But what that needs to do is integrate with lowering carbon intensity where it can. So the idea of complementary other uses is to make the judgment call between building and producing other uses at locations that don't have access to this renewable technology or locations that do. And this location provides access to those renewable sources. And as I've mentioned before, making sure that we can get to this economy of scale of cluster effects means that we can attract other technologies. And we're in detailed conversation on other advanced technologies involved around battery and energy storage, but also around other fuels of the future, which hydrogen is one of. So what we have provided on site between us and the landowner is significant amounts of existing infrastructure that's on the site. Those turbines, the first turbines that were brought forward by the Beattie family, 110 metres to tip. The 9 turbines, the GE turbines to the north, are 132 metres to tip that currently operate on site. And we have a contract with through the local energy company, through to National Grid, to build the electricity hub station just below the pylons near the farm infrastructure buildings that are currently there. A crucial thing that I think is important and I feel potentially hasn't yet been mentioned with sufficient detail is the question around energy criteria. So we, at this location, are going further than any other location where you could locate employment by going past the idea of land use, whether that be industrial manufacturing or warehousing, and overlaying on top of that a level of energy criteria that, if not met, an occupier cannot come to the park. And we've accepted that that would be part of any planning conditions going forward on the scheme. It's really important to note that that was initially developed as 2 out of 3 of the energy criteria, and part of the recent conversations and consultations is we've expanded that to say it has to be all 3 on the park. Now, as a renewable energy generator, it's absolutely in our interest to provide as much renewable energy to people on site as possible. It's in our commercial interest to do so, as well as environmental. So the 50% is a minimum. And the reason it's a minimum, as acknowledged by National Grid, is that renewable energy can be intermittent, which is why we're keen on battery development on site as well, so we can use the best use of the energy when it's generated for when it's needed. However, you cannot guarantee that all energy will be from a renewable source. But as it stands today, we're not aware of any planning condition proposed by a local authority that is higher than that energy criteria promoted for this site. In terms of integrating activities on site, the Beattie family have farmed that land for decades, and during those decades, there has always been a drive towards innovation. If we look at the way in which the land is now managed through stewardship programs on site, which make sure that they protect hedgerows and other ecological parts on the site, there's always been a view to innovation and integration with the site. From our perspective, that means an opportunity to improve agricultural production. Now, the UK has not had a huge influx yet of hydroponic schemes, although there are many around the UK that you can go and see. And this is mainly due to the fact that they are limited by their ability to use heat and light from sustainable sources. And we've done an awful lot of research, we've talked to a lot of the operators, and feel that this is a complementary use for this site, which actively looks to produce shows agricultural production increasing from the site. The research that we've done and the BT family have done and we've done together show that you have more than a tenfold increase in agricultural production from these facilities, and that is widely understood in the marketplace. A real key part to developing something of this nature is to make sure that you're not just going to get caught in a position and a point in time. So we've been working quite hard with people like Cranfield University to make sure that we are providing enough resources on site, such as startup units and an innovation hub, so we can attract other technologies to the location because they will be want to located with the other occupiers on the park. So there is a level of development that's required to achieve that cluster technique. What we are finding in the market that labour supply is crucial, and also is renewable energy and off-grid renewable energy for the future, which limits people's limits disruption in terms of energy pricing and supply itself. So we feel putting that all in one place, if you compare this site to other sites, it is better to use the energy where it's generated than just put it into the grid. It is better to try and locate where you can produce other benefits on the site. As far as we're aware of, on the land holding, we can think of no other development of this nature that will satisfy its 10% biodiversity net offset on site itself. And those are other things that we're looking to promote that Matthew will take you through now in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think as well, just on the energy part, it's important to note that the existing energy production at the site in terms of the solar panels is able to support around 400,000 square metres of development based on the energy criteria benchmark of 1 megawatt per 9,000 odd square metres. So we also intend to increase the energy production at the site with PV panels on rooftops, potential expansion of the solar panels or other technologies, as Tony has mentioned, such as hydrogen, if that is something that is going to work at this site for the future. Bit of future gazing required for that one, perhaps. But combined with the battery storage, we feel that the site is able to meet, so occupiers coming to the site are able to meet 100%, up to 100% of their energy requirements from on-site renewables without access to the grid. The access to the grid is really for that resilience, and occupiers will not be looking at a site if they are only getting an on-site energy source. It has to be varied to make it work for them, to make sure that they've got that stability for the future for their operations. So moving on to the preparation of the master plan. So obviously there's policy 26 that is being responded to, but it's really to provide a framework for a number of different things. So it's trying to meet those requirements for policy 26. It's also looking at giving some certainty for investment, certainty for investors and occupiers, and also giving certainty to the local community as well. I'll come on to that in a minute. But it's really about supporting the provision of additional infrastructure, which is lacking in this country at the moment. There has been investment into the site previously for energy. We think that there can be an awful lot more to make things better, to get greater resilience into the energy network. With the hydroponics, we're addressing things like food security and being able to grow things through the season. So the agricultural land classification at the site is 3B. There is a very small section that isn't 3B, but it's very minor. But the site is not farmed massively intensively because it can't be due to the nature of the soil. Bringing in hydroponics is something that can give you a longer growing season, gives you greater certainty for food supply, and gives you greater variety of crops so that you can reduce food miles of not having to import certain produce. So all of these things are trying to be encompassed in the master plan to make it aspirational, to create a framework for a development that is looking forward. So I know that people are saying there are plenty of industrial units out there that are vacant. Well, they're vacant now, but what about in 3 years' time? What about in 4 years' time? Will they be able to have all of their energy needs met by renewable energy on site? Will they be part of a scheme that can use the byproducts to go to hydroponics? Is that something that we really just want to be resting our laurels on? We want to be pushing things forward, and that's part of the reason for the master plan. So in terms of the preparation of it, we've done an awful lot. There is more to do. There is always more to do. Since 2020, we've got over 40. I think we counted it up. It's nearer 50 last night. Lots of these have been reviewed by key stakeholders and consultees. We do appreciate that the visibility of that has been lacking, and I'll come on to that in another slide. But we've looked at the agricultural land assessment, the geophysics survey for archaeology across the whole site, ecology surveys, flood risk assessment, green infrastructure strategy, heritage assessments, highways modelling, landscape review, mining risk assessments for ironstone, and also tree and hedgerow surveys, to name but a few. So in terms of consultation, so the consultation strategy was outlined with Northamptonshire back in, I think it was 2021, 2022. We started that with briefings at EAP meetings, of which we've done 2. This is the 3rd one that we've attended. Preliminary meetings with local town and parish councils, updates to local MPs and ward councillors about various stages of the proposals in terms of website, when the master plan was launched. And also we had the exhibition at Burton Latimer to publicise the publication of the master plan, which was then available for 7 weeks. And we've been looking across all of the different responses, as have officers at Northant as well. We do understand that there are issues in terms of the consultation strategy, and we are committing to carry out further engagement for future stages of the project. Key issues from the consultation, Paul's report identified a few of those. The extent and reach of the consultation, clearly, landscape visual impact, biodiversity net gain, the scale and the use, and highways as well, of which we've heard quite a few comments. So in terms of landscape, visual amenity and biodiversity net gain, a detailed landscape and visual assessment will be undertaken. We don't have that information with us at the moment, so that's why we haven't been able to share much about that. The reason for the 30-metre tall height zones was not that all buildings will be 30 metres. It will be subject to detailed survey later in terms of the landscape and visual assessment, considering landscape buffers, looking at where it's visible from, and that would be looked at in consultation with Northants officers and other stakeholders as well. Existing trees and hedgerows will be retained where possible. From looking at the initial work that we've done, it's anticipated that we'll be providing about 1,400 new trees as part of the development and an additional 4,000 linear square metres of new hedgerow. That's a net increase in terms of species-rich hedgerow. I think it works out that about 13 to 15 kilometres of hedgerow will then be under management. So in its existing form, it's managed as part of the farm holding, so it's flayed. The species is not as rich as it could be. I think it's about 3 to 4 different species of hedgerow. A lot of it is hawthorn. The new hedgerow going in would be 7 species, much more biodiverse, and managed to really improve that biodiversity quality. We've got about 100 acres is the current estimates for landscape and biodiversity provision. So we've got the biodiversity net gain area to the north, which is near the Cranford Triple SI, which is a geological Triple SI. It's not an ecological. So it's about the strata of rock in that area. It's not about a protected in terms of European protected area for any species. 7.4 acres specifically for lapwing habitat, and that would be purpose-built for lapwing, so not agricultural land that is mowed and ploughed in the future. The landscape would be a coordinated approach covering drainage and ecology as well to really maximise the benefits. And it would support a minimum of 10% net gain, and we're looking to better that wherever we can. So that's based on an assessment of the existing value of the site, and then looking at what is left at the end of it after we've done the development proposals. So putting in more wildflower seed mix, managing the hedgerows, and making sure that everything that we're doing is targeted at increasing biodiversity for those landscape areas that we're putting back in. Okay, transport and highways. So we started the work in about 2021. Discussions about how we scope it started in 2020. So clearly, we can only work with the modelling that we are asked to work with. So the NSTM was what we were asked to work with. That was validated in 2019, so it is still in line with guidance for how long it's been validated and what the state of that is. We've also done further vision modelling, which is a detailed microstimulation of part of the A14 corridor. So the scope of the assessment was based on primarily B8 and B2 users, but also to incorporate Class C, research and development, and some offices as well, because we wanted to get an employment mix and demonstrate that can work. We also put in nearby committed development into the model, and that was all agreed with the Highway Authority and National Highways. So the graphic there just shows that's the NSTM model on the left in the inset, and then the blue area is the VISIN model, and that shows the rough extent of what we've done for the A14 assessment work. So local junctions. We know that there are concerns about local junctions. We are working on those. We have to work on those with the Highway Authority and others. There are other developments that we may need to look at what they're doing as well. As I said, we're looking at the committed development. So Cranford Road, Woodford Road coming off the A510, assessing those, and also down at Findon as well. So there are, we know that there will be impacts on these junctions, but it's about finding the work and putting in investment. There's been a lack of investment. There probably needs to be investment now, even if it's current state. So we're committing to do that and look at that with the Highway Authority. Junction 11 of the A14, it does show that it's still working at capacity, within capacity at the, after the development traffic's been put in. And just to clarify on the floor space figures, so the floor space that's been assessed is 390,000 square metres of employment, plus an allowance for mezzanine development. Excuse me. So the mezzanine is if an occupier comes in and wants to put a different level in their unit, it doesn't necessarily increase the traffic movements, but to make a robust case, we've taken that into account in the modelling just to demonstrate that we've assessed all of the different permutations in case that may lead to further traffic movements. In terms of public rights of way, existing routes are going through the site. We're aware of the application for the bridle way as well, and that will all need to be taken into account in the master planning as we bring that forward into more detail. Any routes that are not public rights of way, if they're going to be accessible to the public, then we'll need to detail how they are managed in the Section 106, which is the legal documentation. So that's a detailed part for planning application stage, if and when we get there. In terms of sustainable transport, so we're working on cycle and walking routes to and from the site, looking to improve those where possible, and really sort of looking at doing that. We think cycling is quite a good way to get around. And then bus access as well. We've been in discussions with a number of different operators to either extend existing services or provide new ones. Excuse me. So in terms of the benefits, so this is kind of looking at it in a very sort of binary sense perhaps, but the benefits in terms of economic benefits, now we know that from recent GVA information that the East Midlands is one of the lower performing regions within the UK. It's also got an above average level of economic inactivity in terms of people that are not in work. So we'll be looking to really address that as part of the development. So 550 jobs construction stage, big investment during that phase as well, and then looking at about 5,500 jobs during the operational stage. Now that can vary. It's been based on data from the Homes and Communities employment density research that basically assesses, it gives you an employment density per land use, and that's what we've used. And then employment and training. So we've already got terms of reference agreed with the economic development team from North Northants, and that's also been endorsed by the SEMLEP. But we're looking to expand on that where we can. So talking to Cranfield University and looking at other connections that we can bring in, either to advise on the development or to get those connections with end users and operators in terms of their knowledge and their capabilities. So we talked about hydroponics. We've talked about the biodiversity area. The educational perspectives, as I said, and as Tony mentioned as well, the future technologies area. that can be a point where we can really engage with people like Cranfield for their research, and also a community fund as well. So there was one established for the wind turbines. We've committed to looking at that as well, and seeing how much that might be able to provide to local communities once the development's operation. So next steps. Well, I think it's fair to say that we've probably got a fair amount to do. The master plan, it's important to note, is a stage in the journey. It's not the end of the story. So if this kind of goes forward to the next stage, it doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly as it has been from the start of the consultation process in that draft form. So we've got recommendations that have been identified in the report to this panel. We've already looked at 21 of those that we have pretty much incorporated anyway, one of which was about the energy criteria. And we will work and talk to Northampton and others and see if we can get all of those recommendations accommodated within a future master plan, amended master plan. So we've also committed to attend the meeting with the parish and town councils, as mentioned previously in the meeting. And then any work to support an outline application, if and when we get to that stage, will be underpinned by a consultation programme with stakeholders, including the local parish and town councils. Obviously, we've heard that they didn't feel that enough has happened, so we are committing to do more. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Tony, for a very interesting presentation. And it is useful, I think, just to, again, have a summary of what the proposal was all about. So, thank you very much for your input. Right, well, food for thought. I'm now going to throw this open for members of the panel to have a discussion. And who'd like to kick off? Councillor North, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, part of process question to some extent. Obviously, as you know, we're here to support you in your role as executive member. And looking at the part of the report at the beginning, page 10 and 11, it looks like there's obviously no further role for you or this panel in relation to this document, because obviously it says, the next stages of preparing the master plan to go forward to the North Planning Committee. That concerns me, Chair, I have to say. Because I actually don't think we're in that place yet. If I go to the conclusions at the end on page 67, it actually is very clear in those conclusions that the issues raised by this EAP in regards to this master plan have not been addressed at all from the last meeting, and the wording is actually quite strong there. It is, and I'd pick up the words, previously remained fundamental, as in the issues flagged by this EAP. So that's the paragraph 25.1 on page 67. So, I said at the beginning, Chair, I do have issues about process, because I do fear that, obviously, any comments we won't be taken on board to come back again before it goes to the North Planning Committee. And further to that, Chair, as you know, we raise serious issues around the scale of the B8 storage, and obviously that's within this report on 11.12 and 11.11. Now, I can only suggest at the moment it's not in conformity with the core spatial strategy in relation to, obviously, this site being assessed for strategic B8 use, and it's clear in the report on 11.12 that this site was not assessed for strategic B8, which is obviously, as indicated in the report, 70%. So that's why I'm only suggesting at this point in time that it's not in conformity with our current core strategy. So therefore, why would we be taking that straight as a development brief, straight to a planning committee for endorsement when it's not in conform with our current local plan? I do fear, Chair, that we're missing a point here, that our issues last time have not been addressed. It's not in a place to go straight to a planning committee, and I can only suggest straight away that it certainly comes back here again before it ever goes to a planning committee, and certainly is in conform and meets our current core spatial strategy, which, as I've said twice already, in my view, I don't think it currently meets it.
Thank you, Councillor North, and certainly the core spatial strategy does have policy 24, which covers logistics, and there are a number of questions which would not be answered by Policy 24, let alone Policy 26, which does not, as you say, allocate this site for that sort of use. In terms of it going to the planning committee in due course, I mean, obviously that only happens when it's an application, and at the moment it isn't. So, this discussion will continue to be informed by this panel, and it will, as it may or may not develop, then it will have to be considered in a different forum. But certainly I will be taking the discussion that we're having today to executive to discuss it as well. But the actual course of an application has to go in its own way, as I think we all understand. But I also think you make an important point about the industrial mix, which we have highlighted in previous discussions with the promoters at this EAP, and yeah, I mean, I do get the conclusions that were made in paragraphs 25(1) and 2, and I also get the quite strong comments which are made in answer to question 5 at paragraphs 11.1 and onwards. So yes, I think, thank you, it's a well-made point. Okay, Councillor Carter, please.
Thank you, Chair. Where do we start? Right, the 3 points. It's got down on page 24, 7.26, about Woodford House being outside Energy Park site, which I feel that is wrong. It's beside it. Were any of the residents actually contacted around that area? Because my understanding that some of these residents weren't. So that really needs to be looked at. Regarding Addington Road, this is going to be a nightmare. The traffic is just going to be terrible. Regarding Findon, well, we know that the traffic is going to be not very good there. It's just going to be overloaded. I think we really do need to look at what can be done at that point. Regarding trees, it says that you can plant 1,400. I hope someone's got a big watering can. Because some of these do need watering, and a lot of times these don't get done. So, this has to be done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carter. And yeah, I mean, highways is absolutely fundamental to this, and I know that there is work going on with it, and but you have got the single, the 2 little roundabouts and the single bridge onto the A14 at junction 11, which may or may not be up to it. But if you note the similar size roundabout at Islip, where the 6116 and a big Primark warehouse, where all the traffic turns to the right to go down to the A14, you can see the effect that those big lorries that are making that sharp turn is having on the road infrastructure there. So there is a lot to be considered without even going to Findon, which was, as very articulately pointed out earlier, and the A6, A5, 10 roundabout is already a massive bottleneck. It's always on Radio Northamptonshire News as being a big delay. It's not easily expandable because of the close proximity of other buildings, and that is going to be a major headache, as well as traffic going on through the actual town of Findon. So yeah, I mean, I think highways is very fundamental. In terms of trees, yes, I do praise the promoters in the work they're doing on biodiversity net gain, but they do have to follow through, and if they are going to plant all the number of trees they're talking about, then they do have to survive as well. Because how often do we have schemes where umpteen trees will be planted, and then half of them, or more than half of them, don't actually survive the occasion. Sorry about that. I knocked my thing off. So yeah, I mean, again, thank you. I mean, I think there's some well-made points there. Councillor Harrington, please.
I was only going to ask, if this were to go ahead, is there an ideal completion date in one's minds, the developers, in order to make it viable, or is it an open-ended thing?
I wouldn't know. Tony, would you like to just clarify that point?
I'd be happy to. So you view it in two different ways. One is it's about the infrastructure, which is where disruption occurs from, building access roads, doing the work on site, so the infrastructure, whether that be the landscaping and the physical hard landscaping to the site. That programme is 24 months to do that infrastructure work. So thereafter, in terms of occupation, that's led effectively by people coming to the site. So that will take time. I couldn't put a timeline on it. I can tell you what we project it to be, but I can't guarantee that because it's about occupation. But the infrastructure is generally the bit that needs the focus, the clarity, the understanding, which has the impact, because it tends to be impacting on the areas adjacent to or outside the site.
Okay, thank you. Councillor North, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your responses earlier. I think perhaps I'll just still try and seek some clarity in relation to the B8 issue. I mean, as you're aware, obviously this is in the core strategy as an energy park, and that's obviously indicated in the report, and that's an adopted local plan. It's just in relation to 11.12, again, come back to that in relation to obviously the call for sites and strategic sites identified in relation to delivering, the B8 that is obviously, as says, is a market need in this area. But I'm just seeking guidance, Chair, and I've said earlier that I suggest it's not in conformity at the moment. Maybe just, officer advice on at the moment, where actually are we at? Because obviously an energy park, as I just said, is in the plan. It's just this balance between what is suggested, that it's at the moment a high B8 number that wouldn't have been assessed through the original core strategy. So still seeking some clarity on that one, Chair.
Mr. Richardson.
Thank you. Pull me up if I'm answering the wrong question. But looking through at those details there, there's recognition that through our more recent reports that there is a significant need for B8 as an operation. Northamptonshire is recognised as being on the edge of the Golden Triangle for the logistics sector. So that brings with it a pressure, and with pressures there's something there for us to consider and manage. The relationship I think we have with it in terms of the joint core strategy and the policy around the use and the fact that this wasn't tested or considered as an allocation through that document in 2015 examination and then adopted in 2016. So that's where we're a step back from that testing process having been undertaken. The world has changed in that time, and that's some of the figures that we are considering in further detail. So we're coming to terms with that. And there is some further work that will be undertaken in assessing sites, whether this be this site, whether it's been looked at through a different mechanism, this mechanism, or whether this site is looked at alongside other sites that have been put forward through the call for sites in preparing the local plan. It's there for debate. I think the undeniable thing is that there is a distinct need reported for strategic warehouse provision, and that's a driver. And I think with this site, the consideration then is beyond that. What is this site able to bring in terms of other opportunities, other uses, and other benefits or impacts upon the area, whether that be around biodiversity, whether that be impacts brought about by transport and traffic, whether that can be something that can provide that distinctive offer for Northamptonshire in that location. And I think that is the effort that's being considered through the preparation of the master plan, and that's where input and thoughts on that are critical, because it can be easy to slide into a response to the need and the focus around the B8 element. I think what we're hearing as well in terms of those reports is that there is also interest in the area for other uses. So manufacturing operators are attracted to this area, and if those debates are taking, or discussions are taking place with other initiatives, other providers, I think it's helping to ensure that the uses on any proposed site can be found to be complementary in providing a rounded proposal instead of a single focused or totally dominated proposal. So they're issues that have been ongoing for a period of time, have been ongoing through discussions internal and external about the master plan and the proposals associated with the Ketching Energy Park. So hopefully I've given a bit of a view, and hopefully somewhere in there is a bit of an answer to the point being raised. Thank you.
Councillor North, did you want to come back?
Yes,
I thought you might.
I do apologise because I do have to go, as I mentioned before the meeting.
Course.
So I did thank you if anybody else is waiting, just so that I'll come back on that. I appreciate the responses, and obviously things change immediately as a local plan's been adopted, especially how long some of them take to happen. So I'm fully aware of the pressures across the Seven-Up area, and as I said earlier, there is a perceived need for more warehousing with the way society changes, and we've had many discussions like that before, but obviously some of the local plan is determined about the aspirations of the council and the needs of the local communities, so obviously we have to take that into account going forward. I note your comments, and I note back in the conclusions that this may be heading for the next Northamptonshire plan rather than the current core strategy, which would be fair enough, because then obviously this site would be linked into the call for sites in relation to obviously strategic sites across Northants for the BA issue. I think the issue I still have, it's not a disagreement with what you were saying, but the issue I still have is that this was identified as an energy park in the core spatial strategy, and I suppose from my point is, you know, there's obviously different objections and different parts of this, but the point is if it's adopted as an energy park, from my point of view, that's the delivery. It's not another BA site by the back door. And sorry to be blunt and maybe misleading or rude about that, but it's making sure it's an energy park, and that's what it is in relation to the current local plan. And anything else would have to wait to the next Northamptonshire plan, when obviously we're at a full course of sites and there's been a proper assessment on the need for the BA around Northamptonshire. That is my concern, Chair. And if that issue is resolved, then all fair enough.
Well, certainly, I mean, it is, as you say, that at least the B8, a lot of this is off-site, is off-plan, so it is a speculative development, and I think that's understood by pretty much all parties. And it's not the only one in Northamptonshire either. There's been other speculative developments which are attempting to be brought forward. So certainly, it is not reflected in the Joint Core Strategy, and we are in the period where we are working on a new strategic plan, which will obviously have to take demand and all sorts of things into consideration during its progress. But that progress, is still in a relatively early stage. And did you want to come back, Simon?
if I may, the policy itself is quite complex in essence, and so I wouldn't like to see that some aspects of it fall away and are forgotten. I think that the first page, if you like, of that policy is directed towards new renewable energy proposals coming forward and for assessing that. Then the second part of it, of course, is directed towards Burton Wold as a site, and that's where it's important to pick up on that it states that the development will serve as a decentralised energy network which will link the energy production to existing and new developments. So it is proposing that as a mechanism, and then it moves on to the issue around in accordance with a comprehensive master plan. So the master plan is that mechanism for understanding the site, answering the points, arguably, that whereby it missed out on its consideration because information wasn't available at that time in 2015 when these issues were last discussed. So the promoters are responding to that point, and there is a policy in place that gives that guidance. The other thing is around the time factor, and we can't hide from it. We will move on if the thought is we're moving on with the preparation of the new local plan, but there are time factors associated with that, and we've presented a challenging timescale that we're seeking to meet. But when we start talking about programme and progress and moving things forward, then you add on post-adoption the potential then for considering infrastructure, well, planning applications, then infrastructure, and as we heard, 24 months for that. There is the risk that we're looking a long way into the future to consider proposals to meet employment offer and the varied employment offer, including within that the B8 offer, but the varied employment offer. So it's a factor. I believe that is it right to delay when there's a policy there that's helping to guide us in considerations, and the promoters are responding to that policy to seek to convince us that the proposal that they have is appropriate, and that then feeding its way through a planning application and its consideration. So there's a timing factor, as well as I wouldn't like to bypass the policy foundations on which the master plan is based.
So, Councillor Deering, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon, for that quite appropriate stuff here. Look, I think that we are quite frankly missing the point here. This is an energy park. It's not a warehouse park. Now, I appreciate there will be warehousing involved in this, but 70% of B8 warehousing is simply unacceptable for an energy park. And we're on about, I don't want to feel as an authority that what we're going to do here is be pushed into accepting something that is not acceptable. And I looked at what was put in Appendix C, and I thought very interesting that we feel that we're being pushed with respect to B8 warehousing. 480,000 square metres are required by 2041, that's whatever, 18 years away. And yet we have 158,000 square metres of empty space. So, you know, I don't think we should be pushed into having to have 70% of this site as B8 warehousing because, you know, oh, it meets the criteria. It doesn't meet the criteria. You know, it's an energy park, is this. When this first came and we thought about accepting this within Kettering Borough Council before we became unitary, one of the visions that Kettering Borough Council had, and I'm sure that Simon will know this, was that very much like Cambridge, Cambridge is an IT sector and it has IT business parks. And we wanted to have an energy park that would facilitate your R&D and things, and I can see Tony's nodding away. That's what we want. What we don't want is 70% B8 slapped here. There are plenty of areas within Northamptonshire that already have B8 that can be extended for B8. This is a very strategic part that we have here, and we have to consider, in my opinion, we have to consider what the public are saying here. I'm very, very concerned about this so-called highways assessment that's been done, because we haven't really seen it. But when we're talking over 16,000 vehicles a day, and I read within the report, and forgive me, with 90 odd pages, I won't have marked the actual one, but the highways seem to not really have too much of an objection to this. And the fact is, we're saying, let's leave it until we have a planning, something that comes to the North Planning Authority. And when it comes to the Planning Committee, unfortunately, my experience has always been that the highways is a statutory body. Now, as an elected councillor on that committee, if I object to something highways related, which is probably what most of the public would be objecting to, we just get told by our planners that it's a highways decision, they have no objection, and they are the statutory body. So what really concerns me is that this is a master plan that has to be right for us and right for the unitary. And if it's going to be right, we have to work better than we are doing, quite frankly. The 70% B8 simply is not acceptable, and the amount of traffic that will create is not acceptable either without proper changes. So we have to be better at the consultation on this, and we shouldn't, in my opinion, be forced into the situation that we have to accept something because we've got a target to go for. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Deering. Okay, does anybody else want to comment? Does anybody want to comment on the screen, Michael or Jenny?
Just a very quick comment, if I may, Chairman.
Thank you, Michael.
Just fairly recently, my understanding is government, together with National Grid, have concluded that radical change needs to occur in the ability to accept various different energy generating sites and to speed up the process. My suggestion really is that 2031, before we are able to even look at putting on some of the energy parks, the energy elements that were approved in 2015 is somewhat late, and that needs to be brought forward with some urgency. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, I think that's quite germane to the issue as well. I mean, obviously, grid capacity is going to be much on everybody's mind for a lot of reasons, not all of them connected with this proposal, but absolutely. Jenny, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because Councillor North and Councillor Deering have already expressed what I was going to say, but it's all about balance, isn't it? And I agree with Councillor Deering about 70% of B8s is just ridiculous. I think there are many good parts to it. I think we're just too far away at the moment. There's too much more work that needs to be done. So I like Councillor North would want to come back to this EAP for us to discuss it further. There's a lot of work has been done. I just think that we need it brought back again.
Well, no, thank you very much, Jenny, and I think that's an absolutely crucial point, because, I mean, this will be coming back to this EAP, I'm sure, as things develop. But, I mean, I do agree, with a lot of what's been said about the actual mix of employment. There doesn't, you know, there's no necessity for the 70%, 30% split, and we are trying to be aspirational in Northamptonshire. You know, we're trying to look for, you know, for higher tech businesses, for life sciences, for some other, you know, more aspirational businesses. And it's not to disrespect logistics, because in many ways logistics has come an awfully long way over the years. But we don't, as an authority, to put all our eggs in one particular sector of the economy isn't necessarily what we're always wanting to be doing. We want to have a diverse range of employment and business options. So, you know, I welcome some of the industrial developments which have come in to Northamptonshire recently. And as you say, Jenny, you know, there are some good things about this proposal. It's quite imaginative in many ways, but we just have to have balance in it, and that is very, you know, it's a well-made point.
Chair,
yeah, please.
Sorry, Chair, can I come back? Yes, it is all about balance, and I hope the developers have realised that their consultation with the parish and town councils and residents needs to improve. I mean, clearly from the attendance you've got at the Cube today, there are so many people who are interested and are going to be affected by it. And I think the developers need to take on board their concerns to improve this master plan. So I look forward to much better consultation on their part.
No, absolutely, and you know, engagement is the key to a lot of this, and I know that I think the developers are, you know, perhaps haven't been engaging with the local community recently as much as would have been ideal, and I think that has been taken on board. I do look forward to a more public discussion of this proposal with town and parish councils and other stakeholders in the nearish future, and I entreat the developers to continue to engage with the local communities. Without local support, it's going to be so much more difficult to advance this proposal. Okay, any other thoughts or comments, ladies and gentlemen? Right. Well, I thank you all for a really interesting, rich discussion on this matter. The recommendation is that members of this Executive Advisory Panel consider the content of this report, including the amendments and further work proposed within it, and provide feedback, which I know has been taken down, to enable the site promoters to finalise the draft master plan document ahead of next steps in the process. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset of this meeting, this panel is a forum where we can discuss proposals that come before us. It is not a decision-making body, and at this stage, there is nothing upon which to decide, because an application has not yet been made, and when it is made, if an application comes forward, then it will be considered on its own merits by the relevant body. So for that, I think we note the discussion we've had today, and I'd like to thank everybody who's on this panel, the public speakers, and yourselves, Tony and Matthew, for your information and wisdom on all of this. We have one item still to discuss, which is item 5, the Executive Forward Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, it'll only take a couple of minutes, so if you could just hang on while we quickly run through that, I'd be grateful, and then we can close the meeting. So let's just move to agenda item 5, which is the Executive Forward Plan. And let me see. This is a regular item, ladies and gentlemen, in which we just consider items that will be going to executive in the future, and many of them will not involve planning or even planning policy. But you will just note that there will be a number of items going to executive in November. The local development scheme will be going, and that is a document in which various planning related plans or proposed plans, the update is, you know, where they are and what's happening with them, and when things are coming forward. That is it's a statutory required document. It's a living document. It updates itself from time to time. So there is the recommendation that the local scheme is submitted to full council for adoption, as periodically happens. I don't know if anybody's got any comments about that one. No, I didn't think so. The other one, which in November will affect us, is actually welcome news, and that is the proposed adoption of East Northamptonshire Local Plan Part 2, which is one of these massive pieces of planning policy. They take years to do. This one has been consulted upon twice. Those consultation recommendations and responses have been taken into consideration. The plans have been sent to the Planning Inspectorate. Public examination was held in Thrapston over, I think, 2 weeks last year. The plan had some modifications, they always do, but was considered to be sound by the Planning Inspectorate, which is very welcome news, and that is going to be recommended to executive for approval and then on to full council for adoption. That will complete the suite of Part 2 planning documents which go underneath what's currently the Joint Core Strategy, and will provide a good measure of protection against unwanted development in Northamptonshire. This Part 2 plan is non-strategic, so it wouldn't actually include this proposal we've been talking about today. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, in November there is nothing that need directly affect us. December, have we got anything? I don't think we do. And there's always obviously the budget updates and key performance indicators, but they are perennial, and we always have something to say about those. So nothing in December. There will be some discussion on, it's not directly for this committee, but this panel, but there'll be some transport funding allocations in January, and some local walking and cycling investment plan material, which should be interesting. And that is the forward plan. So that's, I think, just for noting. Right. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting. It is unusual that we have such a packed public gallery for executive advisory panel meetings, but you are all welcome. And the fact that you've come shows the concern that you have with your communities and with you know what's being proposed. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you, even the ones I can't see behind. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time and trouble to come up. I'd like to thank the public speakers. I'd like to thank yourselves, Tony and Matthew, for your side of the story and your presentation. And of course, I'd like to thank all officers and colleagues on the Executive Advisory Panel for your input and for your hard work. With that, I wish everybody a